feel sometimes like the art of etiquette and proper manners in society has been lost. Is it because of technology and the speed of technology? Is it because we've forgotten to really enforce it or get used to or get our families used to it? Well, today in the Waist Up Wardrobe episode, we are going to explore this and get to the bottom of why we've forgotten to really utilize etiquette in social settings, at home, at the workplace, and kind of get to the bottom of why we have done that and how we can fix that. Because let's face it, it's really nice to be considerate in society. Welcome to Waist Up Wardrobe. I'm Christine Vartanian, an attorney turned personal style expert and image consultant. As the founder of Jade House of Style, I am passionate about unveiling the inner confidence of my clients by developing their personal style and dressing them for success. But is getting dressed up still important in our virtual world? Well, that's where my experience can help with what I call Waist Up Wardrobe. Waist Up Wardrobe is a podcast for all things you need to conduct an outstanding Zoom meeting. It's about how to dress for the camera, but it's not just about the clothes. It's about everything you need to know to show up on brand and professionally for the camera. Join me in the Waist Up Wardrobe studio to discuss how to navigate this virtual world and dominate from behind the desk. Welcome, Waist Up Wardrobe Nation, to another episode here where we're bringing you episode 149. And today we kind of have a very interesting topic that not only will serve us in the workplace, but is also key in our social life, in our personal life, and in our family life. And it is about etiquette and how etiquette matters or really should matter, and that maybe perhaps as a culture, we've kind of forgotten about it a little bit. Sometimes I wonder if it's the speed of technology or that we've made our lives so busy, or if we've just forgotten to really enforce it or demand it, that's happened. But today we're going to have an expert that is going to tell us all about what she thinks and how to really have a better consideration for people in the workplace and everywhere else. But before I get started, as you know, I just want to say that I have this awesome producer that produces the show, Rick Moscoso, and he is always in the green room making everything go super seamlessly and perfectly, create a perfect production, which I'm so grateful for. And I thank you for following Waist Up Wardrobe and, reviewing us when you can, and subscribing to us on iTunes and YouTube. We're on those platforms, and joining us here from time to time, or maybe every time, at 11:30 live every Thursday, where we bring you a new fresh show where we try and really up level the way you show up in business, in your profession, on camera, but also off camera. And we also are always talking about really important entrepreneurial topics. So I want to introduce my guest for today. My guest is Christy Spencer, and she's the founder of The Polite Company, which offers individuals and group etiquette coaching on business, on social, and dining etiquette. So the whole spectrum of etiquette, everything you need to know about how to really conduct yourself. The Polite Company instructs on the principles of consideration, respect, and honesty. Christy is a certified etiquette trainer and a graduate of the Emily Post Institute, the foremost etiquette authority for the last 100 years. 25 years of experience as a journalist and businesswoman uniquely qualify her to deliver the message that good manners lead to a successful personal and professional relationship. So I am so excited to welcome Christy. Hi, Christy, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Yes, this topic is so interesting because it really is something that you need to use in every part of your life, right? Not just your professional life, but your social life and your family life, because you are oftentimes, people are role models for others. And so it really is pervasive in all areas of our lives. And I definitely want to dig deep into some of those key things that we can remember. But before I do that, I have this 60 seconds to get to know you. I love to kind of delve a little bit into who you are so we can get to know you on a personal level. How's that sound?
That sounds amazing.
Awesome. Okay, Christy, I'm going to ask you this or that questions, and you just, tell me what you think. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Reading or writing?
Writing. I
Okay.
love writing. I love writing. My former career as a journalist is writing. I continue to write today for a couple of publications and online, and especially when it comes to etiquette. I love sharing that any way I can, but writing over reading for sure.
Yeah, well, I think that, I mean, some of these questions you'll know they're kind of rigged because, like, I'm trying to dig deep so people can know exactly what your roots are. Okay, so TV or radio?
Can I go with podcasts?
Yeah, it's a modern day radio,
Yeah,
right?
I'm a podcast junkie, and I absolutely listen to them all the time. I know music has an important role in helping our mood and those kinds of things, but I love to feel like I'm learning, so I gotta go with radio.
Radio and podcasting.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's very cool. And I love it when my guest is a rebel and says, I'm going to answer differently. So I love that. So that gives us a little insight too. Okay. The phrase please or thank you.
Oh, they're both so important. Oh, this is like my children. Um, I would have to say please, because there's not a lot of substitutes for that word. There's a couple more things you can say for the thank you, but please,
Mm.
please.
Oh, I really like that. I like that analysis of why. Wow. Well, we're going to get into it and we're going to talk a lot more about please and thank you and so many other things. But let's really give the audience some really good information on where we are today in the world of etiquette and where we've come from, maybe, and kind of how things have evolved. Can you give us like a little quick, like historical timeline of how you've seen that evolve?
So we've not seen any changes as much as we have seen them in the last few years. I mean, this is, if you love etiquette, this is a fantastic time to be an etiquette teacher because things are changing and things have evolved, and COVID definitely had an impact on that. It had an impact on our social lives, our work lives, our virtual world. All of those kinds of things were impacted. So I think that we are, as a society, becoming less and less formal. As far as becoming more and more rude, I don't like to look at it in through that lens, but we're definitely becoming less and less formal, which I say is great news because it takes less to stand out today than it did 100 years ago.
Mm.
And so really that thank you note, knowing how to dress appropriately, knowing how, which fork to use, those kinds of things will help you stand out so much more today than they ever have in the past.
Wow, that is such a great perspective. Um, and I totally agree with sort of not using sort of the negative word of rude because people, I don't think the newer generation or culture today realizes that it can be perceived as rude. I think it's more like you're right. People just become more informal. As an image consultant myself, I've had company leaders come to me and say, could you draw a diagram of what would be appropriate to wear at work and not?" Because I have a lot of millennials that work for me and they'll come in with the shortest shorts. And even though they don't interface with clients, we're still kind of a community and it's just not appropriate, but they just don't know. So it's interesting because not only have we become more informal with maybe the way we act in terms of, etiquette, also in dress code when it comes to the newer generation, younger generations, or the more current generations don't think about the informality of how they show up, which is interesting, right?
Oh, absolutely, and I think that it does it is a generational kind of thing, but again, I hate to pick on any generation because there's good and bad parts. I mean, if we're gonna just be kind of stereotypical about generations, when I talk to young people, believe me, they have a lot to say about the older generation and vice versa. But
Yeah.
I think that, um, there is still a level of what is appropriate and what is not. And when people are coming to you asking for, like, what does it look like? We really need to be very demonstrative with people. We have to say, this is what is appropriate and this isn't what is appropriate because we can't just assume that everyone comes to us with that knowledge. So it's really good to be very, very descriptive in those kinds of things because how we show up matters. People are going to make a first impression about us, or they're going to judge us. And I know we shouldn't judge one another, but it's impossible not to do so. We come from people who we've evolved from people who had to judge other people for their own safety. And so we can't ever skip that. We can't ever just wish that people shouldn't do something and then we go ahead and we skip the norm. I mean, we've got to realize and have that self-awareness.
Yeah. Well, everything you say, I totally agree. As an image consultant, we have these parallel philosophies because it applies sort of in both arenas. And and the whole idea of how you show up matters is really interesting because it's always been that thing that people will say, well, I don't know why it matters if I'm dressed, in a more formal business attire than it is if I'm casual. My brain is like
Mhm.
amazing, right? They're hiring me for my genius. But here's the thing, people don't get to see your genius when they first meet you, right? They see how you act. And human nature evaluates. We evaluate people. That's just like you said, it's a built-in safety mechanism. We are sizing each other up because we want to know if we want to deal with somebody, we want to have a relationship, whatever the kind of relationship it is. So it is really important because those little things are hints into the personality of people, right? Is this somebody that is care takes care of themselves? Maybe that means that they're a little bit more careful. Is this somebody that thinks about the consequences of what they say, and therefore they watch what they say and they're polite. So there's definitely a place without this idea of being stereotypical or rude, or like judging anybody or anything like that. There definitely is good reason to follow some of these traditions, if you will. Also want to comment on what you said about the generations, right? So it's so interesting you say we can learn so much from the Gen Xers and all the millennials and everything like that. So it's interesting because as the older generation, we're all saying, oh, millennials, they don't want to work. But it's the great thing is there's so much to learn from them in the way that they work efficiently, in the way that they have this better work life balance, and they can learn from us too, though, right?
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, so it's like it's not just that, and I totally agree. Like they should not be uh no generation should be dumping on the other generation. Because there's pros and cons everywhere, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
yes. And sometimes it makes those problems, you know, so much more compact because we can blame that one group or we can blame that one thing, and it's really more complicated than that, and we all share a little bit of the blame, but we just have to recognize, like, we communicate differently. We might have a different idea of what's acceptable socially and at work and those kinds of things, and so it just opening up that conversation, I think, is really important.
Absolutely. So, you did mention that now more than ever, we have found that people have become a little less formal and a little less focused on some of these key etiquette ideas that we're going to be talking about. Do you have an opinion as to what you attribute that to? Is it technology? Is it that we have made ourselves busier? Is it just that families don't feel like it's the important thing to instill anymore? What is it, in your opinion?
I think, and it's not to say that we're infinitely more stressed than people before us, but I think stress plays a huge part in this because when we are stressed, we are thinking about ourselves. We're looking inward and we stop looking outward at other people. And then when we stop caring how we're impacting other people, we become rude. And then when we become rude, we stress other people out. And so it's just kind of this vicious cycle that I think that the stress of daily life and we've come so far in recognizing anxiety and those kinds of issues so important, but I think that it comes from stress, and it's whether it's 2 parents trying to work or 1 parent trying to work, all of these things that are happening, plus, a worldwide pandemic, and then our kids got sent home from school, and we were supposed to teach them, and then, all of these things happen around us, and sometimes it's easier just to switch it off and
Yeah.
not worry about how you're gonna impact others because it is complicated, and it really does take thought.
Yeah. Well, and impact others, but also it's interesting because the way you act, it kind of reflects back on you too, right? So if you are treating people a certain way, forgetting to say please and think I'm just using the basic stuff or just not really paying attention to those basic consideration points, then really people are going to learn to receive you in a different way. They'd receive you in a more pleasant way if they felt like you were a little, you were warm. And I'm not saying to go hug everybody, but that there's certain warmth in your tone and the way that you're acting. What do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we are going to get what we give out in the world. And if you have, I try to be as positive as I can be. I mean, even if it's sometimes a negative, concept, I try to kind of, see that sunny side. Not to the point where, delusional or those kinds of things, but try to be realistic, but you try to be happy, rooted from happy. Um and that's amazing because when I started living my life like that on purpose, it made the people around me happier, and then it came back to me as well. So, I mean, it really is kind of self-fulfilling.
It is. And that reminds me of the book by Dale Carnegie, um, how to how to have friends and influence people or
Yeah.
something like that.
Mhm.
I'm kind of blanking out on the title altogether, but you know what I'm talking about, right? Where he talks about that a lot. He talks about if you want to have positive influence on people, then you have to kind of treat them in a way that's positive.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So there's business etiquette and there's social etiquette and there's dating etiquette. And I know you, from your website and from the information I've learned about you, you really instruct on all those areas. And as much as I'm curious about every single one, I kind of want to focus on the business etiquette only because, we have a half an hour together and I want to be, I would love maybe follow-up episodes where we can focus on the other stuff, but on business etiquette, when you talk to your clients about business etiquette, what's like the number one thing that you see people forget to do when it comes to the business world?
I think, we have some of office pet peeves that people, will have about other people. So we can kind of judge, like, okay, if this is me, talking too loud on the phone is one of those things that drives your coworkers absolutely up the wall. Um, Shared spaces are a really big thing. And I don't know if this has shifted a little bit in the last couple years, but sometimes, especially because we were apart and then we got back together again, that those shared spaces kind of be a casualty of us getting together. So if that, it might be filling up the copy paper. It could be talking too loud. It's not taking care of your space and not kind of respecting other people's space. We really kind of got used to being alone, and coming together is kind of hard. I think virtual meeting etiquette is another thing. Of course, you're preaching that all the time, but we have to understand how we show up. And we are still expected to be professional, even though we might be at home. And I don't think people pay enough attention to that because they think, oh, first of all, biggest sin for me is not turning your camera on. You've got to turn that camera on, remove the mystery of what else you might be doing at the moment by having that camera on. And then that's really an incentive for you to be able to pay attention as well. I mean, that it just kind of keeps and holds your attention. But there's so many things like that everyone has their own kind of personal thing that drives them crazy from their coworkers or what they see their employees do. But I think it is a lot of it is just being aware that all of those little things add up, and how you treat people makes the biggest difference. um, so I think it's just there's so many things that people come to me with that it's hard to narrow it down, but it really is, just those daily interactions.
Yeah. So interesting because you brought to focus right now my actual specialty, and that is the virtual room, right? The virtual space. And this is episode 149 of Waist Up Wardrobe. It was born during the pandemic because I was starting to go, why are people showing up with their unmade beds in the background? I don't want to be in anybody's bedroom. And and in professional, like if you're talking to your sister, I get it. But like if you're on Zoom with your boss, your coworker, your client, nobody wants to see your bed, you
No,
know?
and we don't wanna see you eating, we don't
Right.
wanna see you vaping, we don't wanna and I'm only saying these because all true stories.
Yes.
We don't, keeping your microphone on, off, all those kinds of things, it's so important, but, it became much more important.
Yes. So it was so funny. So all these episodes of my show were born because of it. We had a whole Zoom, actually the launching show was about all the Zoopers that I called Zoopers, the Zoom bloopers, where people, like famous people, were showing up without clothes on, or
Right.
significant others are racing behind,
Yeah.
like, inappropriately dressed.
Yeah, and that is a hard thing to recover from, and it can be really embarrassing. It can be career ending. It can be, all of those things. But I was listening to your podcast before I was on because, do my homework, and I always do that with when I'm going to be on a podcast. But I
Mm.
swear yours, I'm not just listening to, I'm now binging them because they have so much great information and it's on all aspects of business. So I'm you yeah, if COVID brought us nothing else, they brought us one great podcast.
Oh, well, thank you. That's awesome. I'm loving that you are into it, but I see the crossover in our work. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
that makes sense to me. I did a whole episode on body language for the camera, which, you think, wow, do we really need to be thinking about body language? But, basic things, and this crosses over with etiquette. Smiling at people, looking into the camera. People like to see your hands when you're podcasting because I guess well, according to the body language coach, people, when they see your hands, they trust you better.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
um, so there were so many interesting things about just that body language piece that I thought was really interesting, or some mannerisms that you might do that might make you untrustworthy, you know? So, definitely, I feel that because we were all thrown into this virtual world, a working world during the pandemic, people didn't know how to act. They just didn't know. They hadn't done it before. But even basic common sense, like there was, I don't remember who it was exactly, but it was some high up government official in a South American country where it was like completely not undressed from the top and on Zoom. And I don't know if she didn't know that her camera was on. So those are really important things to check, right?
It was like the most important thing.
Yes. And, or people going to the bathroom, taking the camera,
Right.
going to the bathroom.
Right, it's like, if you need to do something, we can continue this call later, but
Yeah.
don't think that you're not gonna get caught because we've all had the mute on or off when we thought otherwise, and so it's best just don't leave that to chance. So
Yeah. One thing I struggle with in our new world, and I don't know, you tell me your take on this as an etiquette consultant, is that my younger generation, my children, teenagers, right? You walk into their room and you're having this conversation with them, and all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, their girlfriend's on the FaceTime with you in the room, or their buddy is like in the room with you, and it's like, oh gosh, I hope I didn't say anything wrong, right?
right, right. I mean, I think that goes to, when we are having business meetings, if you're gonna have somebody on speakerphone, which is, I mean, like, so 1990, but, you would announce who's in the room with you, just come that's one of those courtesies that you do, and so I think that that's true, if I answer speakerphone on my car, I will say, "Hello, I'm here with," my son in the car, my mom in the car, just fair warning, don't blurt out something that you don't, want them to know.
Yeah, no, I think it's so interesting and remarkable that when I tell one of my teenagers that, "Oh, I didn't know somebody was on the phone," they're like, "Oh, yeah." Well, I'm like, "But you have to tell me, like, I don't know."
Right, right.
But they're a little bit oblivious to it, and, I mean, I point it out when it happens, but I still feel like this is their world that they live in, and and they don't really get it yet. Maybe because they are teenagers. Maybe as they mature, it will sink in. Or if they have something happen to them that is embarrassing, then it
Yeah,
will.
that would be my suggestion, is
Yeah.
the next time that happens, you just start, singing your best opera or something that really embarrasses them, and they will probably let you know somebody's on there again. So, I have kind of a weird parenting style, but,
Love
that
it.
might work.
I love it. And Rick, my producer, is a parent himself, and I would love to get his take on this. He is gonna get grumpy because I'm bringing him on, but he's a wealth of information. He has such a great male perspective that I always love to get. As he is getting on here and switching gears, I want to just move into asking you. So, as a parent, right? Do you think it's the onus is on the parent or somebody else to really help the younger generation figure these things out?
The thing I know for sure is that if parents don't have manners, their
Yeah.
children won't either. So, there's no amount of bringing somebody like me in, although as much as I would love that, but if they don't see it modeled between people and at home, you will not have a child that is going to be considered as having good manners. It's just not gonna happen. They can't learn that, anywhere else. It takes a lifetime at home to learn those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Rick, what say you?
Well, I totally agree. I mean, having 2 grown kids now and then 1 teenage boy, um, presents I mean, the girls were fine. Th w it it was just common sense to them, right? But, my son, he's growing up in a different time, and some of those things that we expect as parents, just don't aren't, aren't commonplace to the kids today, it just seems like, right? Now, because my son had 2 older sisters to model after, it's a little bit easier, but if you have a kid today, I've seen a number of his friends are, for the most part, good, but I've seen other parents' kids that are about the same age. It's like, what are you teaching these kids at home? It's like, holy, or what are you not teaching these kids at home? It's just amazingly, it's amazing how oblivious they are and how impolite they are, in social settings. It just amazes me.
Yeah. And again, kids need to be taught. They're not just going to learn, by themselves, right? They need to either be taught by a role model or even school. And it's a team really raising kids. But just to what Christy was saying, the pandemic shifted things. Parents became so stressed. And I remember when I was raising my kids, when they were younger and I had my girl, we had the mom circles. One of my biggest pet peeves, and this, Christy, I'm very curious to learn your take on this, was parents that always, every single time reminded their kids say thank you, say thank you, say thank you, almost like robotically. Like I felt like it wasn't even felt like I would I would tell my kids, say thank you or say please, but then I would give them a couple opportunities to sort of see if they did it themselves. And and I feel like that worked for me as a parent, that it started being like I feel the gratitude, right? I feel the gratitude as opposed to something robotic. Because it was so funny because I'd have some of his friends over and they'd be like saying thank you for nothing, or and I was like, wait, I didn't do anything. What are you saying thank you for? But it felt like it was just I mean, I guess it's better than the alternative, but I also feel like there's this balance, right? You want them to feel the gratitude and express it. Um, and what do you think about that? I mean, you might disagree, I don't know, but it's just something that was a real like, I used to think, like, I want my kids to understand what gratitude means, not just say the words, you know?
And we want some authenticity
Yeah,
too, especially when we're just with our families. So I would say if you're having to remind your children daily to say please and thank you, that's not working.
yeah, yeah,
Otherwise, it would have happened by now. So I think that you gotta go with another approach, and maybe it's sitting down and saying, "You know what? This is what it makes me feel like. This is what it does, and kind of approaching it from a different angle. Around school time, I do urge parents right before school starts, like, hey, let's start getting them in the habit of saying please and thank you right before they go back to school because it's been summertime and we've been lax. But that really shouldn't take more than a couple weeks of prompting. And, that's one of those first words that we teach kids is please and thank you. And we're so proud of them when we do that. And there's absolutely no better compliment than when somebody tells you that you have polite children because you're like, if nothing else, I mean, I've done this. Um, but I think that, you may need a different route if you're having to do it all the time, but you also want it to be genuine. I have a son. He is a very black and white, very driven 17-year-old. And we sit down as a family. We're very lucky to be able to sit down as a family and have dinner. And at the end of dinner, he always goes, "Thank you very much, Mom, for making dinner tonight." And while that sounds nice, I'm like a little more behind that. We can't just go through the motions. We have to feel it. It has to be authentic. So I think that, and sometimes that might not come in the form of please or thank you. I mean, maybe that's picking up your plate and theirs and taking it to the sink. Maybe it's doing something else. So there's other ways to show that appreciation, but I
Yeah.
think we definitely want to make it really authentic for our children, not this kind of robotic have to kind of thing, because I don't know that they're really feeling it that way.
Exactly. I totally agree. And I was curious to ask you that question because I always felt that a little bit I was raising my kids and I always thought, I mean, I think it's really great that parents are teaching their kids that, but how do you make them actually, like you say, be authentic about it, really feel the gratitude so that they can express it? You want to kind of tie in those two things. Um, wow, such good information. But I wanted to ask you because this is something that I'm sure comes up in your line of work. Sometimes what happens is that people from different cultures have different ideas of what is polite or what might be off-putting. Um, and and I don't know if you've encountered that, but like in some Asian cultures, looking somebody in the eye is not polite. So some of these things that maybe we teach as a culture might not be culturally acceptable in another culture. So how do you work with that, or have you encountered that at all, actually?
Yes. I mean, we all come to work from a different house, or we come to school from a different house. And we might have been the only child at that house, or we might live in a house that's really noisy, or we might live in one that's really quiet. So we're all coming from different backgrounds. That gets exacerbated when we're talking about you're coming from different countries.
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of differences when it comes to the manners. So, and manners are things we do, how we answer the phone, how we hold our fork, how we do these things, and then what we expect other people to do. So I hold out my hand to shake it. I expect you to do the same thing in return. The overriding thing with all of these are principles. And so the principles don't change. So we have consideration, respect, and honesty. And regardless of the culture that you're coming from, we all want to greet each other respectfully. Now, is that a handshake or is that bowing?
Mhm.
That's going to vary from the culture to culture. So that's a really big view of how things can be influenced by culture. But that culture then can be within a company. What's the culture there? What's the culture at home? And so it really is, it definitely influences that. And that's where that having some empathy and having some insight to other people comes in really handy. My way or the highway does not work anymore. We have to be able to be accepting of others and where they come from. I think that that's so important. But yeah, it definitely changes depending on where you work, where you live, what your family life is like.
Yeah. And so I guess that becomes an interesting idea that conceptually, if you're from a different culture, you might be received in a way that people think you're being not as friendly or not as, polite, but really it's not that. So I think, I guess one of the most important things is to be communicating to understand each other. I think that could solve a lot of those miscommunications because, Etiquette is a form of communication. It is a very strong form of communication. Um, no, saying the word no, decline politely. Tell
Yeah.
us what your technique is for that, because that's a hard one for a lot of people.
It is hard and it takes practice. And so what I use is I use the word care. So we start out with C, and that is the first step. And we're going to consider the other person's request. Saying a really fast yes or a really fast no doesn't come across well. So you want to take a little time, consider their request, and then you have A, and that is you appreciate them asking. So thank you so much for thinking of me. For this year's bake sale again. I appreciate that you really like the cupcakes that I make. Then we get to the R, and that's the response. And that response should be have your answer in it, maybe have a reason attached to it, and have a timeline. So if we go back to the cupcakes example, but this year I'm not going to be able to help out because I'm already stretched really thin at work. Can you ask me again next year? That's your timeline. Or you just say, you know what? I hate baking. I don't ever ask me again. Maybe that's not the most polite way to do it, but depending on how
Yeah,
friendly you are with the person.
yeah, yeah.
And then E is just to have empathy. And when you give that answer, just be quiet and let the other person say that this is a more serious request than cupcakes. They're asking for your help in some bigger way, is to listen to them. And a lot of times they won't remember the answer that you gave them, and they won't be upset that you told them no, but they will remember that you listened to them. And
Ah,
they will end up thanking you at the end of the conversation just for letting them vent or, say what they needed to say or, that's I think is so important. And resist the urge to walk that no back or to change it once you get somebody's sob story, just listen.
yeah. Well, I love that because that goes back to the idea that people won't remember what you said. They'll remember how you made them feel, right? So that
Right.
makes a lot of sense. And people are allowed to not to have to, to have the boundary to say no, right? But most people, especially women, we're always wanting to be helpful and give. So it is a hard thing, but it's also good practice to know your limitations, you know.
Yeah, and I'd say, being polite does not mean that you're a pushover.
Right.
It means being able to eloquently, so strange that I can't say that word, eloquently, but, being able to express your boundaries in a good way, and then maybe even build the relationship at the same time. But it doesn't mean always saying yes, and it doesn't mean that we're always pleasing people. It means that we know how not to do that well.
Right. Yes. And if exactly. It's about really being able to communicate with people on good things, but also being able to communicate with them empathetically in things that maybe they don't want to hear, right?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
that is what being authentic is,
Yeah.
right?
So we have to have difficult conversations with people and we have to take care in those conversations. But I'm here to tell you there is a way that you can do it and actually improve the relationship without giving up your ground.
Yes. And do you offer any workshops or coursework on that? If you could tell us about it before we
Yeah,
wrap.
I do personal branding and image for people. And this is people who maybe they need a little bit of help networking. Maybe they need some help with introductions, online introductions, how they're showing up, how they're being introduced to other people online. And guess what? That's not when we actually talk to people. That's when we go look somebody up or we look up things about them. And so personal branding and image. I also do dining etiquette that I can do workshops for in person. And then, of course, any questions anybody has about social etiquette, I'll anytime that you're impacting and you're interacting with somebody else, I think that there's a chance for things to go incredibly successfully, and there's a chance for them not to. And so when we think about these things, we're really giving ourselves a better chance.
Yeah. And your website is thepolitecompany.com. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Yes, thepolitecompany.com.
Definitely have that on the page so people can reference it. So one of the things I want to do that I just thought of because I think is a good way to kind of wrap up the end of the show or near the end of the show is that I am going to start a list right now of 5 things that people should pay attention to while they're on their virtual office on Zoom. And then if you would then continue with another 5, I'm putting you on the spot here, but I know
Okay. I
we
can do it.
then we can give everybody a list of top 10 things to pay attention to when it comes to etiquette on Zoom.
Okay.
I'll get us started. Okay. So one of the really big things is you want to have decent, good lighting. You don't want to be left in the dark. You don't want to look like you are, in the witness protection program where you only see a silhouette. Okay. So lighting is important. You also touched on the idea that, we should have our cameras on, right? Because people want to see us because they can't see us physically there, but at least let them see our face and have us put our best face forward. I do feel that people don't want to be in other people's like private spaces, like, their bedroom or the bathroom, or it actually feels uncomfortable, especially if you're in a professional setting. And I will take it one step further because I do this for my clients. I create backgrounds for my clients, physical backgrounds in their Zoom room that represent their brand. So you actually can create these billboards behind you when you're in a Zoom room that can become a conversation piece or, advertising, or give people an inkling as to who you are and what you do. And it could be business related. Like for me, I have my mannequins because I do a lot of wardrobe building. But it could be that you're an artist and you want to showcase your art as a conversation piece, or if you're a teacher. So there's all these things that I do when I build these sets for my clients. And I think that is one of the easiest ways it's an extension of who you are and your brand. And finally, I would say smiling. Smiling is kind of, I would say that if, and not holding an unauthentic smile, right? Not holding a constant smile, but smiling in a way is sort of the window to your heart, right? If the eyes are a window to your soul, then the smile is a window to your heart. It is very welcoming. People feel comfortable. And sometimes people are having a bad day. And if somebody's smiling in their face, it actually elevates their mood. So those are my top 5. And would you be able to give me another 5 from your perspective that we can add to this list of 10?
Yes, absolutely. I think that, I think that again, we're going to go back to self awareness. But remember that some people are in the office and some people are at home. And no matter what, the other one thinks the other one has it better. And but one thing that I do hear from people is for people who are working remotely and they're sometimes, meeting with people in the office, don't do anything that they can't do. Okay. So I'm not a huge fan of, getting your dog in the shot and petting your dog or being on the treadmill or, being outside because you're just kind of rubbing it in their face. Like I can do this and you can't. I don't think that that's a good thing.
Right.
I just think, being aware of how that is. I think you want to make sure that all of your other electronics are off. I mean, we've heard of the phubbing where people kind of gravitate to their looking at their phone when they're mid conversation. That can happen on meetings too. So you want to show that you're present. You want to, have all of those other distractions off. I think, comb your hair, you wash your face, I mean, because you want to be, at least that presentable. I'm not saying that you have to, wear your 3-piece suit in your closet as you're having these meetings, but I think that you want to look that you at least tried to do that. I think another thing is manage that mute button. I mean, it gets pretty tedious when we're having to constantly remind somebody that they're, muted or their microphone is off. Trying to think. I'm going back to the eating, smoking, and vaping. No, I don't. I don't. You wouldn't do that in person, and so I don't think that you would do that in other people. Gosh, I think that's 5. I think, yeah.
Yes, we did it. Top 10 reasons.
We could go on all day.
There's so much to cover here, but I love that. I love it. And we always wrap up the show with the Waist Up Wardrobe weekly wrap up. And I always ask the guests, what's that main takeaway? And I'm going to just extract it from what you said. And that is, don't do anything on Zoom that you wouldn't do in person, right? So if you're going to office, you're not going to show up in your pajamas, right? So don't show up
Right.
with pajamas on screen. If you're going to the office to have a conversation, you're not going to be vaping, so don't do on screen. So I love that one as a main takeaway. But can you give us a tool, or is there any manuals, books, any kind of tool that could be beneficial for somebody if they want to learn more about this topic?
I think, got my certification from the Emily Post Institute. They recently put out a new book that revamped their 100-year-old book, which has evolved over the years, but really evolved, the centennial version of Emily Post Etiquette, and it covers everything. I mean, it's completely rewritten. It is a great resource, and you don't know what to do, and you don't have mom or grandma or whoever to give you some advice. That's a great place to start, to find out, what's the norm, what's accepted. I would say I talk to so many people and they say, "Oh, my grandma had that book on their shelf." And I'm thinking, "You should have it on your shelf too." It really is, and it's very practical, and it's not about being showy or flaunting your money or your this or your that or being like the most elegant person in the world, because gosh knows that is not me. It's about getting along with other people and
Yeah.
making them feel special along the way. And if we can do that, I think that we've had a pretty great life.
Yeah, I mean, life is about relationships, right? But you make a good point, because as we move farther and farther away from intact, authentic relationships with all of social media and technology and now AI, that part of etiquette communication has been degraded a little bit, which kind of now it's all kind of making sense, right? A lot of these things. So we almost have to work a little bit harder at our relationships. And part of being working harder at a relationship is really understanding how to communicate and how to be polite to people. So it makes everything kind of gels now, right? Everything makes sense. So give us a tip or two for the audience, as they leave the show, if they were going back to their team, or, and want to implement some basic things, what would the like one or two tips be for them?
I think get a work best friend. Get somebody who is your go-to person and you are theirs, and be that's your honesty person. And that is somebody who can tell you when you're talking too loud. That is the person who's going to tell you if you don't zip up your zipper. That is the person who is going to tell you there's spinach in your teeth and you're okay with that. But you really need somebody at work that you can trust and rely on, that you can bounce things off of, because we have to have those conversations. We have to say, what do I do that drives you crazy, and how can I fix it, and vice versa. So I really think having somebody that, will kind of give you the skinny, give you the lowdown, tell you where you can make some improvements, I think is really important.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And finally, give us an action item, like right now. What do we do right now to make us a little bit more aware of our etiquette?
Find a reason today to write a thank you note and send it in the mail.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I'm gonna do that. Okay. Awesome. Christy, if people want to get a hold of you, through your website, is there any other way that they can get a hold of you?
Instagram and Facebook. It's the Polite Company, Christy, on both of those. I every day share tips about the things that we've been talking about, just these things and more. I love answering people's questions. So if you ever have a question, those are my five favorite words. I have an etiquette question. Hit me up. I'll be happy to answer it.
Wonderful. Thank you. This was such a fun show. Maybe we can get you back here in the future on another part of your work and when it comes to etiquette. But thank you so much for being here, and really appreciate you and appreciate all the information, and just reminding us that etiquette still is alive, and it should be. And that is how we communicate with each other. And so there you have it, Waist Up Wardrobe Nation, episode 149. etiquette matters. And we gave you tons of reasons of why it matters, because we want to still have those interactions that are considerate and polite, because that's what builds relationships. That's what keeps us authentic toward one another. And we need it now more than ever, because we have so many things that disconnect us, like, all the wonderful things, like the wonderful technology that we get to enjoy. But the downside of it is that it does disconnect us. So we have to work a little harder at connecting, and using our proper etiquette and our manners is certainly a way to do that. So we're here every Thursday at 11:30 Pacific time, bringing you a new fresh show for Waist Up Wardrobe, whether it's on actually how to show up on camera, or to show up with your image outside of the camera, or anything entrepreneurial. We talk about it right here. So join us next Thursday and bring your friend. Hi. That was amazing.
Good. I'm so glad.
I hope you had a good time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. And I feel like there's so much synergy between both our works that I feel like we kind of have to do something together.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
love to do that. I feel like, so much of what I do is trying to help people put their best foot forward.
Yeah.
It's so, yeah, I don't know if it's work wardrobe or, I dressed people for television. I would physically go to their house and say, "You can wear this together. You cannot wear that together." And so that's the part of the television that I've been able to kind of carry over to this part. I mean, there were lots of things that I did that have more translation than I initially thought it would, but it really is about image.
Really is. Yeah. I mean, it's the way we communicate to the world, right? It's another language. It's a whole other language, is how you show up in business. And like we were discussing, it's important. People think, oh, it's a superficial thing. It's not really a superficial thing, because that's the only way we have to evaluate people when we meet them, is how did they show up? How are they carrying themselves? How are they talking to us? Are they, all the body language and how they're acting. So it does matter. So I mean, people could say it doesn't matter for as much as they want, but the
Yeah,
truth
they'd
is,
say, "Oh, I'm too old. I'm set in my ways. Nothing's gonna change for me," and that's great, but someday you're gonna, need to make a good impression on people. It's
yes,
just inevitable.
yes. Well, I really enjoyed our conversation, and I am trying to put a community together. So through Podmatch, I have gotten so many great, exceptional guests. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to put a community together of experts where we can actually kind of mastermind together, but also possibly partner, because there's so many great minds that I've really interviewed and I've really enjoyed, and maybe create some kind of a community. I've already started something like that, so I just kind of want to get more people into it.
Mhm.
So my point is, I wanted to say a lot of my guests who've been showing up lately, I've been asking them if it's okay if I send them an email, letting them know about this community and seeing if you want to opt in. So I'm kind of asking you the same
Yeah,
thing.
absolutely. Send it my way. I think that would be great.
A lot of great experts, just some remarkable,
And it's so good to learn from people outside of your industry.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, business is
Mhm.
pretty much um the skeleton, and everybody has a business that, is different, but the skeleton, the framework is kind of the same, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that was amazing. Thank you so, so much. Rick, are you still there? I hope so. What do you
Of
think?
course, I'm still
In
here.
and out? I was like, wait, I wanted to follow up a question there, but
Uh,
you were camera shy today.
no, I always hide in the studio.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. What do you think?
No, I thought it was great. I was waiting for a window. I wanted to pop in and talk about because Chrissy had mentioned it before you came on, was food truck etiquette.
Oh, I mean, yeah. There's etiquette in every area, every arena of life, there's so many topics. What do you think, Christine?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was telling Rick that I do a monthly show on Oklahoma City, television afternoon show, and that was last month's topic was food truck etiquette, but really the hottest topic now, and I just make this stuff up, I'm like, "Yeah, let's talk about food truck etiquette." Um, but, that's comes from the television background too. I can kinda find
Mhm.
a hook and make things relevant. But tipping has been the hottest topic
Mm.
for months now. I bet I probably 15 articles about, where people just reach out and want you to comment on it, but about when you're tipping too much, too little, when you shouldn't tip, when you should tip. Tipping is just out of control. It's
Well, totally, and this is the thing that actually I've been having this conversation a lot, so I'm not surprised that it's a big hot topic and a hot button, but the thing is, like, everything, like, everybody wants you to tip them now, every place, for everything, for anything. It's like, "Wait a minute, is this a tippable action? Am I a
yeah,
rude person for not tipping you right now?" You
yeah,
know?
it can make things really uncomfortable.
Oh, you should write a manual on that because that is definitely a
Yeah,
hot topic.
I wrote a blog yesterday, and it was just about creating your own policy. It's a lot easier when you already, like, made your own personal policy. This is when I tip. This is the only time I tip. This is how much I tip for good service. And then you're not kinda sitting there scratching your head, wondering if you're being a jerk.
I mean, it's remarkable. I think they're just trying to shift the standard, and create a new normal when it comes to tipping, but it's a lot. It's a
Yeah,
lot,
and I
yeah,
think that inevitably it's gonna make us less grateful, which is the biggest problem,
because you're
is that's
forcing people to
mhm,
do it. Yeah, yeah,
but yeah.
in a way, yeah. What do you think, Rick, about that?
Uh, well, yeah, that's a sensitive issue with a lot of people, and I do Friday night dinners at this local club, and yeah, tipping's all over the place. On the food side, it's all over the place, and it's more meant to be um, I think a lot of people think the dinners that we have are a membership, feature, and so they pay their annual dues, and not everybody tips, right? And then some tip like a dollar or two, which is ridiculous when you're paying, 20-25 bucks for a meal. But it's something. They do donate in other ways for charity, charity purposes. But I just wonder if they tip like that here. I wonder how they tip like that out in a restaurant when they're out at a restaurant.
Mm.
Because I tip all the time when I'm at a restaurant, and it's just and and my daughters have learned the process. I mean, I used to work in corporate a lot, and so it was just one of those things that I learned how to do and do it correctly, and fairly. But I shake my head sometimes at some people, and their mindset and what they do. I mean, yeah, it's
Well,
it's
and
it's a
there's no rules, that's the thing, like, there
Mhm.
used to be, like, a guideline, right? 15%, 18% if you have great service, it used to be before the pandemic, there was a guideline, and people had 2 choices, right? They either tipped what is standard, or they wanted to give a little extra, or if they were really generous because they had this amazing service, they could do whatever they want. But now it's like everything you do, like whether it's a DoorDash or you go to an ice cream shop and you're getting an ice cream cone. Everything is asking for a tip, and it's so funny because my son, he did a door dashing job when he was a couple of years ago when he was here for the summer from college. And it's interesting because it was a great learning thing, right? So he said, so people would tip, but he said, "This is so weird. I went to the best house in the best neighborhood, and the lady didn't even give me a tip."
Mhm.
So, generosity, that's just one to my other philosophies. Generosity is not a function of how much money you have. Generosity is a function of really, how you are, how you act.
Yeah.
But also, we can't push people too hard. I mean, you can't mandate those things, So
No.
it's very
I mean,
interesting.
well, I work the front of the house for these dinners at our social club. And so we have a new point of sale system that we installed. And when on the terminal, I have a choice of f- what is it called? Um, when they pay for their bill at the front of the house, first thing that comes up is the option to tip. So we put it up front because we don't do table service, traditional pay at the table type of thing. So I've seen restaurants where they force the tip on the terminal right away. I think that's what it's called, forced tipping.
Hmm.
Not, and it's kind of derogatory because we're not forcing them to tip. It's just the tip option comes up first. Um, and a lot of them were like, "Oh, okay." And what I find is that it tends to prompt them to leave something where they probably wouldn't have left it before. So it's just a different way of doing things. Um, the
It sounds like
switch.
you like tipping, Rick. You like
Pardon?
tipping. You like
Uh,
tipping.
well, I mean, yeah, I do tip. I do tip
Yeah.
sometimes. Sometimes, I mean, I'm not a ridiculous tipper, but I'm a very fair tipper.
You're
It's
cutting
like
out.
I rarely, yeah, I rarely tip less than 20% unless it's really substandard or really poor, service. And so, I think that's fair, and I tip more than that if it's impeccable service.
Yeah.
I the other thing too, I think it's a generational thing. I because I have a father-in-law who's in his 90s now, but he's like the Energizer Bunny. But when he lives back in the Midwest, so it's a little bit more laid back and it's not so fast paced as it is out here. So when we go out to dinner and he treats, um, I remember the first time we went out to a restaurant is it was a rib place or whatever, and the meal's like 60, $70 or whatever. Um, he signs the bill and then he throws down like $3. I go, "What's the $3 for?" He goes, "Oh, that's a tip." Thinking Tammy and I look at my wife and I look at each other and it's like, "Oh my God." All right. So so it's like this ongoing drill is that we start to walk out, and then one of us purposely says, "Oh, you know what? I forgot my keys or forgot something on the table." And then we go back and we take care of it, like we should, and still try and coach him that, you should leave a little bit more, you know. But yeah, I think, but it's a generational thing, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's no generation that is being more prompted to tip than this one. What do you think, Christy, as we wrap up here?
Yeah, I think, there's really nothing more embarrassing than to go out with somebody who doesn't treat waiters well or doesn't tip well because you are having to put yourself in a position like, "I just can't let this happen on my watch," but you don't wanna correct
Mhm.
the person that you're with and embarrass them either. So, I think we're all really responsible for ourselves, but, yeah, that's a hard one. And dealing with family and a generation above you too, but I think I would have to go back, and, that's why it's always important to carry cash, just in case.
Yeah, exactly.
What's so funny is that, and what you're basically, I think the hard part is that you're walking away from that waiter, and they represented you at that dinner too, right? Because you guys
Mhm.
doesn't know that they paid maybe, but or whatever, but that you are represented by that person who's paying and tipping. One of the things I think is really cool as I just want to mention this too is that I actually often love to tip people that wouldn't anticipate being tipped. Like I think
Mhm.
that is really kind of a fun thing to do sometimes. There was a restaurant that we used to be regulars at, and there was this bus boy that I know that the waiter usually gives them some tip, part of their tip, but um, sometimes I would just, like, slip him a tip bigger than I would have given the waiter just because they were so amazing. Like, I really appreciate, um, like, service that is from the heart, and so when you see that, it's that is the best time to like, I love tipping that, and especially for the busboy who typically probably wouldn't get tipped, I think is like somebody that typically doesn't expect to be tipped and then tipping them can make somebody's day. It's like really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Christy. It was wonderful. Thank you, Rick, of course, as always. I hope we get to connect again, and I will be sending out that email hopefully soon, kind of formulating it and kind of putting together the group that I want to include. And I'll look forward to collaborating with you again, hopefully.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Christy.
Thanks, Christy. Good meeting you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. We
Do the speedy.
speedy recap.
Yeah.
All right.
All
Let
right.
me isolate you.
Okay. Well, let me get close to the camera. Oh, this was a really good show. Like there were so many good takeaways,
Yeah.
Like-
Christy, you're welcome to hang
my
around and watch how we do this.
Oh yeah, I would love
if you
to,
want.
for my future
Yeah.
podcasting days.
Yeah.
So
we're gonna do a thing. Yeah, let me just bring you back on.
This is where I will do a speedy recap, and it's sort of that last bit summary, and I end up using it on my social media to sort of sometimes to what's the word, to talk about the show and tell people to go back and watch the full episode. So it's like advertising, like marketing. Yeah. All right.
Christy, I'm gonna mute you in the background, but you're welcome to
It's full of bloopers.
hang out and watch. Yeah,
I can't wait.
This is a
I
great
can't wait.
resource
It
for
always
people.
invites
Yeah.
my guests to watch. I'm like, Rick, like this is live. Actually, we leave the thing rolling at the end because of kind of the scenes.
Listen, this is okay. She's a television talent, so she's seen this before.
3, 2, 1.
All right. There you go. All right, I'm gonna mute everybody.
My hair.
Here we go.
Get close to the camera. Okay. And then make my script.
Oh, hold on. Let me take your lower thirds off. Okay, when you're ready, Christine.
Okay. Does it feel like the rules of etiquette and good manners has been lost over the last couple of years? So, why is that happening? In this episode, oh gosh, I'm gonna start all over again because I didn't do that in the right format. Okay, isn't it important that let's try over again. Isn't it important that we still recognize that etiquette and proper manners is important in the work world, but also in our social world, so that we can be considerate with one another and really have authentic relationships? Did I forget something here, Rick? Was I going to say?
Yeah, you were gonna say so that you
I
can
did say so
or
that.
something. Did you?
I did, but I'll do it again. Let me just do one more time,
Yeah.
and then
It just seems short. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
In the last few years, it has felt like we've forgotten about basic etiquette in the workplace, on and off Zoom, and even in our social lives. And I think it's because we've spent a lot of time disconnected. But isn't it important to still have that so that we can hone great relationships and communicate with each other better?
Yeah, that's good.
Enough? Okay. Yeah. Okay.
That's good.
Okay, cool.
No, that's good. Part 2. Do you take good notes?
I'm looking at my notes. I took them in like pencil and I could barely read them. So I'm just kind of trying to.
All right. Yeah, there's a lot of good nuggets in there.
Yeah, there was the tape. The main takeaway, I actually reiterated it and I can't remember what I said. Main takeaway was what was the main takeaway?
You can break these up too if you want.
No, I will. But
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what I said was the main takeaway because I know it was really good. Like I don't know. Emily, do you remember?
Here, let
I'm
me,
sorry, Christy. Not
Christy, do you
Emily.
remember? Christy, do you remember
Um,
what the main takeaway was?
Gosh, call me Emily again. That's like the best thing. I mean,
Sorry.
I
Yeah, there was the main takeaway. At the very end, you said something, and I just reiterated it, and it was just so good. And I can't remember what it was I said. Let me see. Maybe I can for my questions here. Connect. Okay, I'm just gonna come up with a different takeaway. It's fine.
Okay. All right. Here we go.
Okay. In episode 149 of Waist Up Wait. Okay. In episode 149 of Waist Up Wardrobe, Etiquette Matters, the Waist Up Wardrobe weekly wrap up in a nutshell boiled down to this. Remember, etiquette helps connect us as human beings. It's a different, okay, I'm just going to start over again.
You can start with after boils down to this.
Yeah, I feel like that one I have to do in all one fell swoop, so it makes
Oh, okay.
like
All right.
feels
All right.
connected. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah. In episode in episode 149 of Waist Up Wardrobe, I should have just taken your advice. In episode 149 of Waist Up Wardrobe, Etiquette Matters, the Waist Up Wardrobe weekly wrap up in a nutshell boiled down to this. Etiquette matters because it's a way of us communicating with other people and building authentic relationships. People will not remember precisely what you said, but they're going to remember how you treated them. And therefore, when we say please and thank you and give them really great ways of working with them, I went too long. Okay. In episode 149 of Waist Up Wardrobe, Etiquette Matters, the Waist Up Wardrobe weekly wrap up in a nutshell boil down to this. The main takeaway is remember, being polite and having good manners is really key to continuing having those authentic relationships with people. I'm going to start this over again. Sorry, I don't want to like stumble. In episode 149 of Waist Up Wardrobe, Etiquette Matters, the Waist Up Wardrobe weekly wrap up in a nutshell boils down to this: making people feel
No pressure. You can do it.
In episode 149 of Waist Up Wardrobe, Etiquette Matters, in episode 149 of Waist Up Wardrobe, Etiquette Matters, the Waist Up Wardrobe weekly wrap up in a nutshell boils down to this. The main takeaway is etiquette still matters because we still have to connect with people authentically. And when we are demonstrating good etiquette and proper manners, that connects us as human beings. One of the tips that our expert gave us, okay, you can cut it there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just go into tips.
Yeah. Just start that one. Start clean.
Yeah. One of the tips that our expert gave us is having a work buddy. Basically, somebody holds you accountable at the office and lets you know if you're a little bit too loud or if you are doing something that's becoming a pet peeve for the office, because nothing's better than somebody that can be honest with you so that you can make sure that you are on your best behavior. A tool that our expert gave us, I'll start there again. A tool that our expert told us about was the Emily Post new publication, the new book that a tool that our expert told us about was Emily Post's new publication. A tool that our expert told us about is the Emily Post new book that has everything you need to know, all the nuts and bolts around etiquette in the workplace and beyond. And finally, an action item. Let me see what the action item was. I wrote in pencil. I can't read anything. And I can't read my handwriting. Christy, do you know what you said was the action item?
Any help with the action item
It
was?
was the thank you note.
Oh yeah, the thank you. That was a good
Okay.
action item. Okay.
All right.
Okay. And finally, the action item that our expert told us about, which is such a great idea. I'm going to go do that right now, is think about somebody that you need to send a thank you note to, or that you'd like to send a thank you note to, and just surprise them by sending them a thank you note and saying thank you.
Okay, I'll make that sound great.
Okay, great. You can massage that.
Oh,
So
yeah.
at the end of the show, we do this, and it's like I'm always like so spent from the show that I'm like, oh, now I have to get all the pieces and put it together. But usually, it's some days it's good, some days it's takes this many takes.
Yeah. Well, I worked with television news anchor people that had been in the business for 30, 40 years, and you're doing great. You're doing
Oh,
great.
thank you. That makes me feel so good. I really appreciate that. Yeah. No, it's wonderful. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to meet you, Christy.
Yes. I can't wait to stay in touch.
Yes, me too.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Now we're out. Thank
Now
you.
we're
Take
out.
care. Okay, let me kill this.